Everybody, I did that in the last one too. If you're here for the push notifications API, you're in the right spot. If you're here for something else, you're probably in the wrong spot. But you can stay if you want. So welcome. First of all, we are from Bluecadet. Bluecadet is an experience design agency. We partner with mission-driven organizations to create a broad suite of products and environments. We embrace design technology and innovation in the service of content, emotion, and experience. We create experiences that engage audiences through increased knowledge, empathy, and action. My name is Pete Inge. I'm a senior developer there. We deal with a lot of CMSs, backend stuff. That's my thing.
And I'm Shaun Baer. I'm a developer. I do front-end stuff and back-end stuff and all over the place kind of stuff.
So, first of all, this deck originally came from kind of an internal slide deck that we had to kind of explain some of the things that we were researching and looking into. So pardon some of the stuff, but also it made it kind of fun, so enjoy. So we want to give you a little history of just kind of what we do at Bluecadet to understand where we're coming from, how we're getting into working on these, like getting into the web push notifications, PWA stuff. So we do a lot of interactives and kiosks, mainly JavaScript based. 50% of them are JavaScript based, Chrome and kiosk mode. We update content typically from external CMS. For the most part, we use Drupal and the other CMS that's out there. I won't mention any names. Depending on the client's needs. We need to update content typically on regular intervals because content changes. That's what happens. We're often limited by our network architecture, so smaller museums, just other things not being connected to the internet all the time or stuff like that. We're just often limited by the network architecture that we have. So we're trying to solve these kind of problems on a lot of these projects. So from the beginning, back in the day, we worked with the Field Museum. This is a picture of the map and stuff. I wasn't actually on the project, so I really don't know anything about the project other than what's on these slides. But overall, how we structure these JavaScript apps, we started out having like a bash script that would scrape endpoints from CMS, grab our data, grab our images, grab what's going on, and those would run in a regular cycle. For some of these things, it would be basically we run it every 30 minutes, so we're always hitting the CMS every 30 minutes. As you can imagine, content might not change every 30 minutes, so it's a little annoying. We would check a JSON feed, check timestamps, do all that, kind of see if it changed. Then we'd load into the application using attract as a cover. So you can imagine if the Field Museum is busy one day, it's never going into the attract state. So that's kind of the state where everything is just waiting for people to touch it. If people are working with it and interacting with it all day long, it's never getting updated. So if we did have content that was changing every 30 minutes, it would actually never get updated. Not necessarily the best practice. I guess this is the cons. So also we have multiple interactives running the same scripts. But again, because we might have them in different spots, one might be able to get updated, another one might not be updated. Updates aren't immediate, so we have to, again, download all our stuff, download the assets. And again, we're continually pinging the CMS for data, even if nothing's changed. So like other projects that I know I've worked on, content might not change the whole week, and we're like pinging the CMS pretty frequently to see if there's updates. Kind of a lot of activity when there's nothing going on. So the other thing is, timing to see when new content is there. So a little over a year ago, we started working for the Mann Center. This is a sign that we added this really large sign in the Mann Center, the music venue here in Philly. So one of the big things is we needed instant emergency alerts or canceled events. So they're an outdoor venue. If a storm pops up, we need to tell people instantly to run for cover. Another use case that they're talking about was lost children. If a kid gets lost in the venue, we need to have updates happen immediately. We did some work with the Independence Visitor Center, which is also tied with the National Park Services. So if you see NPS or IVC, it's all the same projects. So the Rangers needed to update the public as soon as the Independence Hall tickets were sold. So that's another project we'll show you in a couple minutes. So again, that was an immediate thing. You don't want to have a sign saying, we have all these tickets available, but not really when they actually go to buy them. And then kind of our challenge that we want to challenge ourselves with is, can we do this without third-party services? Can we keep it all within our products, what we're doing already, can we not rely on anybody else? So what we tried. So there's a bunch of screens open trying to do a bunch of stuff. So a couple things that we tried. One, we looked into WebSockets. WebSockets are great application protocol. A lot of things that we do, like I said earlier, that our network architecture, we just can't use Node all the time. We use Pantheon for a lot of our projects, and we can't run a Node server on Pantheon. They're just not set up to do that way. Acquia, though, does have Node's capabilities now. I haven't worked with it, but
it does.
Have you used it?
It's very little.
Little? I think it works great. It's like a separate whole instance, though. You have to buy a whole new instance. Okay, but that's still works though.
Same thing. It has development, staging, and then prod.
Sweet. So, if Node works for you, great. That's definitely one way of doing it. We looked into Firebase for the NPS ticketing wall, but there's a lot of third-party dependencies, and we didn't want to add all of that technical debt to the project. We wanted to see if we could keep doing it other ways. And we looked at these push notifications. So actually this GIF right here is using push notifications. This is our first test. We just have a React app running on the left, or on the left 3 screens. I think they're all different browsers. Excuse me. And then on the right, we have the Drupal site that's handling all of these push notifications, or we're sending out the notifications from it. So we're actually updating all 3 of these JavaScript apps from Drupal, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, so the push API, this is kind of, in terms of those third parties being able to go to something that would be vendor specific, that would be easy to use. The push API ended up being a great way to integrate and not have to use those third party services. The push notification and the AP and the web push API and the notifications API kind of work in tandem with each other. If you've ever seen one of these little pop-ups when you go to a website, you've interacted with the notifications API and the push API. It's kind of like a subscription model that allows content to be pushed directly through the browser, from a website through the browser to you, the user. Both of the APIs are made by the browser vendor, so there's spec implementation and style stuff that can vary on them. And yeah, most of the time these pop-ups seem a little bit spammy. They can also provide valuable resources to a user, such as being able to subscribe to different pieces of content on a website. And the push API in particular really met our needs at Bluecadet.
So first of all, one thing that we want to say, we did get this working in Drupal and that other CMS that is out there and available for people. The NPS ticketing wall, their backend was WordPress. The Man Center, we built out the website for them, and that was Drupal website, and then we're controlling the signage from the website as well. The signage is pulling in events and content from the actual website, and then those alerts were specifically for the wall. It's the only thing that you can see on the wall. Oh, right, here's the picture of it. So the signage itself was a React app, and again, controlled by a Drupal CMS from their website. That's all, I got all those notes. And here's just, so sometimes I'm really bad at documentation. I had a really low quality video of testing this out, and that's all that we can get, so low quality GIF for a high quality work. But yeah, this is what's going on, and as you can see in here, we submit the form in Drupal, and it is using the web push API to notify the JavaScript app. We're not actually sending OS notifications because it's a touchscreen and not a user, but we're using that same technology to accomplish very similar type things. And again, we were using the existing CMS. I guess I kind of said that. And then,
so NPS Ticketing, National Park System. If you go to the Independence Visitor Museum, you will see this, I believe it's up now.
The ticketing is there.
I should have checked that before I left the office. So basically the rangers working for the National Park System have there's a movie that plays, and they have an in-house ticketing system. It's nothing super robust, but they needed to be able to, on these displays, update times, update if time was sold out. So push API seemed like a perfect use for this. We were able to use a similar process to the Man Center, but we did in WordPress. I actually wrote pause for booze into my speaker notes, but I guess I won't. Rangers are then able to log into here, and then they're easily able to change the status to sold out. So as you can see at the very end of that, it updates within just a couple of seconds of publishing that bit of content in the back end, and getting, again, pushed to those screens rather than those screens requesting that data from the CMS. Oops.
Yay, so service workers, a lot like handy dogs that help us out with things. First of all, how many people here are familiar with PWAs, service workers, all of that backend? Is this new terminology and technology to everyone, or are you somewhat familiar with it? Some. All right, cool. So there is service workers. They're non-blocking, secure, low-level computer operation that you can access conditionally. I'm not sure where that sound came from. That's cool. A service worker is basically a script that's on your browser. It runs in the background. It's not dependent to the window that you're in. It's actually kind of based on your browser and your domain and where it's kind of scoped in the domain. So it's basically a JavaScript file that's running for your domain. It doesn't matter how many tabs or windows you have open for that site, but it's kind of running in the background. You don't need a web page to actually interact with it. It can, again, it's working in the background. It's listing for things on the browser level. Should click more. We react to events emitted by the server, JavaScript pages, and HTML pages. Again, we can open up a whole new world of possibilities, and that's the fun stuff that we're going to get into. And again, we can push data. So that was a big thing, kind of what we, as an agency, we're trying to make that leap of, instead of like always pinging and trying to figure out what's new, we want what's new to be pushed to our JavaScript apps, our other apps that we were working with. So that was kind of the big hurdle that we were really working on. And I should keep clicking. Instead of pinging CMS for data, we can now push it to our app. So the push subscription. So again, we want to start defining some of these technologies and what's going on. We have the push API. You have to have a push subscription object that contains the required information. So this is kind of based on the browser. So if you're in Chrome, you're talking with Google to grab a subscription. It has an endpoint that is unique to, and I don't know how the magic works, how it knows like what computer and browser you're on. Google knows everything. So yeah, but it gives you an endpoint, it gives you authorization keys, so it locks it into your browser on your computer at that time. It's also, the push API is also known as a web push API. There's a couple different terminology names for it. So it gives the web application the ability to receive messages from external sources, and we have to have an active service worker. So the service worker is what's actually listening for these push messages. It's not a normal JavaScript that's on a single page. It's a JavaScript file that is at service worker level. It's based on the browser, kind of scoped to the browser, not necessarily your single individual page. And again, you have to register a subscription. So when that pop-up comes up, typically for the notification, it's when your service worker is asking for a subscription. That's when the browser knows to say, hey, can I actually show you notifications? Notifications and the push API are very closely married together. There's still kind of, as far as I understand, there's still debate. There was debate, I think there still is debate on, can you actually push without showing a notification? So basically, you could push, the idea behind it is you could push all this data around, and the user has no clue what you're doing in the background, which is kind of security and all that fun stuff, and you don't know what's going on. So most of the spec talks about if you're using push, you have to show some kind of notification, whether it's actually an OS notification or if it's something changes on your web page. Like the user has to know that you're pushing data around. So again, that's what the subscription, you have to register the subscription to be able to use the push API. Each subscription is unique to the service worker and browser. So if you're on Chrome, you're dealing with Chrome. If you're on Safari, you're dealing with Apple, and they manage those subscriptions. Now, as your app, your JavaScript app, these subscriptions need to be managed. We get the subscription object, but our app needs to do something with it to know who is who and how messages are getting handled. So that's what comes into our backend and what we need to talk about, and we'll get into a little further here. So the next thing is the notifications API. This, we don't need the service worker. At any point in time, we can kind of create notifications, and again, we're going to ask the user, can you allow us to show the notification? So a big thing with here is you definitely want to do this at the right time. You want to, for our examples that we're showing, as soon as you load the page, it's going to say, hey, do you want to allow notifications? Do you want to show notifications? But if you're creating a real robust app, you want to do that in a timely manner. So if someone wants to like sign up for a notification or like an email or a notification or something like that, that's when this should pop up, and not really like when you load a page, because as soon as the person says block, it's really hard to ask them again. Like you can't actually ask them again. If they say block, you're done. Now they can go into their settings and refresh things and clear it out, but as soon as they hit block, chances are they're not going to do that, so you already lost that customer. So just be careful with that. You want to do that at the right spot. Again, we show system level notifications unique to each OS. So again, our like an Android phone compared to OS compared to Mac, there's a couple different settings for each one of these. Like on your phone, our Androids have a lot more options, and like the ringer and the buzz can be changed patterns, so you can like create your own notification kind of thing. It's kind of cool. iOS is pretty terrible, and it's not supported at all. Again, must request user permission. And as I said, it's hard to get the user to allow once they've blocked, so you definitely want to be careful about how you notify. So if you're using this in the web context and not kind of like in the kiosk type thing that we're talking about, basically when we build a kiosk, we just say allow, and we control the computer, so it's kind of easy and simple in that way. So notifications APIs, this is what I was talking about. We have a lot of options that we can change and work on. But again, it's kind of specific to each operating system, which actions actually do anything. So some of them too, actually more and more now, you can have more action buttons and different tasks that you can do on the button for notifications. And those are, I think, pretty cool and have a lot of possibilities. So we're going to try to go through a diagram. It's really confusing and annoying, but also hopefully we can kind of see the flow of information and how it's going. So we have, first of all, our user at the top. They're interacting with the web app. Now the web app and the backend, the CMS itself, could be the same thing. It could be your website that you're working on, or you might have a decoupled a backend for it. And then your web app is going to have a service worker attached to it. It'll be a client of your service worker. And then the browser vendor push service, so using the example of Google again, that would be Google. That's who we're going to talk to. So does that somewhat make sense at the moment? All right, there's got to be a lot of arrows and a lot of lines. Yes?
With like Drupal, since like a lot of times the source would be like updating a piece of content, wouldn't that also end up kind of being the push server? Or at least the source of the update?
Yes, but we'll get to that and I'll explain that a little bit. But so basically your CMS has to talk to the push server and say, here's the information I need you to take. Because my CMS, I have no clue who you are exactly. I just have a subscription object. I tell Google, whoever signed up for this needs this message, and they take care of that. So it is it still is a third party type of thing, but it's part of the browser they're already using. But does that clarify that? Okay. And we'll get to those arrows in a second. So the first thing that happens is the user's going to enable that thing. If they don't enable it, nothing else can happen. Nothing's going to work. So we need the user to enable the notification. Our service worker gets that information. We can now continue with the rest of our process. So the service worker is going to talk to Google, say, hey, I need to grab a subscription. Now you may already have one, so it gets the same data. So it checks for an existing one, or we get a new subscription. Once I have that subscription, I'm going to go to the back end and say, hey, here's my subscription. Save it, do whatever you need with it. So in Drupal, basically what we did, we created subscription entities. We can field them, we can do all that kind of stuff. And then we'll push, for some reason, we'll push data. And here's what we're talking about. So the CMS now says, hey, we can't turn off notifications because we're going to show you notifications. So now we're getting notifications. Sorry about that. Actually, well, yeah, anyways. So now our CMS can act on on something. So for us, our example, we just have a simple form that we'll be showing in a little bit. And when we submit the form, we're grabbing all our valid subscriptions and saying, hey, send this message off to these people. So this is now that part of the line. And then our browser vendor, the push service, can now communicate to the service worker, and the service worker then creates the notification and pops up your OS notification. So there's a lot of interaction going on. Hopefully that is a little bit clear. Is there any questions or thoughts or comments on that? The original diagram was really confusing, and this still is a little bit confusing, but hopefully it works.
Yeah. So now we'll go a little bit into like the code and building out the start of this project. Rather than getting into live code and messing with that, I'm just going to show you a bunch of screenshots and kind of try to explain some stuff. So this is like the base level of a project here, and the important files to just point out are listed here. We have the service worker.js. That's the service worker file. That's one that's just going to run on the browser side. We're never actually going to be able to do anything with it with our own JavaScript besides receive and send events to it. And then we also have app.js. That's our like main JavaScript file for this project, where we're going to be doing everything, including installing that service worker. And manifest.json, it's not required for push or for the notifications API, but that's an important file for a PWA. So we do have this available at the repo link at the bottom. So if you want to download it and take a look, you can take a look at that manifest.json. Basically, that file is just handling like, this is an icon if somebody saves it to the home screen of their phone, something like that, and sets a bunch of like PWA level color settings, things like that. Also, props to Christine Martino from the Philly PWA meetup, and I think she works at ThinkCo, but she started this main project, and then we kind of came in and added on the push and notifications API kind of stuff. So yeah, going through the files then, we have this index.html file. The only reason that I'm calling it out is because we're just importing app.js, which gets everything kicked off. In the service worker.js file, that's where we're, if you take a look at the repo, there's a lot of like other caching stuff and things like that that are happening. But here we are in particular just worried about the push and notification events. So the first event that we have up there is the push notification. So basically anytime that the service worker gets a push event, these events will fire. It's basically spinning up the service workers, making sure that it claims. You can have multiple service workers technically firing in multiple tabs, so that claim method just says like, make this the important one. This is the one of record that should be listened to by all the other service workers. And that stuff's pretty cut and dry as far as like service worker stuff goes. I don't even know that I can tell you exactly what each one of those things is doing for the most part, but like that's the basic hookup for the push event to get it to fire off that post message event. And then just down on the bottom, we're just showing you that you can attach click events and notification close events as well. So if you need to do something like hit up your Google Analytics or hit up like some kind of data processing stuff, you can like actually store when people click the events, when people close the notifications, things like that. We're just console.logging stuff here, so showing that it works. And now in app.js, this is the main one. First, we're checking to make sure that a service worker exists, and if it does, we initialize it by calling navigator.serviceworker.controller. That starts off the process of registering that service worker.js, the sw.js file, and we also put in scope, which is important because it can mess you up a little bit. Here we're saying that the scope of the project starts at root, You could go into directories if you have like specific path kind of stuff. Gets a little complicated. We've only really messed around with it as far as root goes, but be aware that that scope can be important. So if you have problems, that's a thing that you should definitely check out. And then once we register that service worker file and it's doing its thing, we basically get the registration object for the service worker, and we can run a bunch of different things on different events, check for errors, do things when it's active, do things when it's installed, like hide and show HTML based on whether or not user can have or can use a service worker or not.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Hopefully you're not coming. So we were playing around with some stuff this week, and it was really annoying. Service workers are a pain to develop. One of the things is a service worker won't update if you have all the tabs open of the same under the same scope. It'll wait till everything is closed before the service worker will update. So one, that's partly why we have to set our scope, but also why things are installing or waiting or active. It might be waiting and sitting there to wait, and you're not really doing it, so you can tell if your service worker is waiting. If the user never closes all their tabs out, it might be a really old service worker on there. I still haven't totally figured out, but we're working on one thing, and it was like I had to keep opening and closing all my windows because it just wouldn't update. It was a pain.
Yeah.
But dealing with service workers are a pain. Be careful how you do it. Make sure you close all your windows. Okay.
Yeah, they can also get like cached pretty hard too sometimes, so you have to like update versions and things like that. Yeah. So yeah, they can be a tricky beast. But yeah, back to the demo app that we're showing. I just want to quickly, before I go on to anything else, jump into VAPID Keys. VAPID Keys are pretty important to all of this. They basically set up the subscription. They are basically a way of encrypting data, like the header data that gets sent between the CMS and the browser. There's a couple tools for creating them that I have listed down here at the bottom at the links, and then a link to some additional info about what they do exactly if you really want to know. They're basically just long strings for encrypting, but you need one. The email, typically, if you're just doing blanket notifications, it should just go to like some kind of like admin email. If you want to get real crazy, apparently you can put in specific emails in there, and that will handle where they get sent. Like they get sent to people with emails if they're logged in, or it gets crazy. So VAPID keys are a thing that you're going to have to worry about. For the app, we need to generate a VAPID key. We need to get the public key, and we're going to store that in the Drupal side of things. And then the public key we need to use in the app, basically to decrypt the data that's coming down. So back in app.js, we're just storing our VAPID public key. Again, this matches the one that Drupal has. So we can translate that data back and forth. The next thing that we're going to want to do is configure subscriptions. So this function is basically going to determine if a service worker can be accessed or not, and if not, we're going to bail. And then we're going to set up a registration object, and then we're going to start communicating with the service worker. So once it's ready in that navigator.serviceworker.ready method, we're going to that method will return a service worker registration object, which then we will push to another function and treat it as a subscription. We're going to see if a subscription exists, and if it does not, we're going to take our VAPID public key. We actually have to run it through a function to convert it to some crazy base 64 hash string thing. To be honest, I'm not sure what it's doing, but this is what the function is. Copy and paste is great. Most of the stuff too is coming from like the Google documentation too, so this I believe we got from there, and it just turns out it's completely necessary to have. So we're converting the VAPID key to a base 64 hash. And then we are creating a subscription because we've determined that one hasn't existed yet. So we're setting up that VAPID key data. We also have to pass this user visible only variable as true. There is no other option for it, but you have to pass it. That's one of those things, as Pete had mentioned before, about how like they couldn't really determine if you should be able to send a push event without having the user know that they're receiving a push event. So they put that there, and then we're like, it's only true. Maybe we'll change it in the future. So weird little thing. So if we do have an existing subscription, we're just going to run with that, and then we will start to set up the subscription data, or take that subscription data, I'm sorry, and we're going to pass it to the CMS. So here we're using fetch. You could also do like an AJAX call or something like that, depending upon the JavaScript that you need to support. And we're posting that data into Drupal, which then I think we're going to jump into what we're doing with that data on that side.
Yes. So what's going to happen, we're hitting, so right now we have this test site on Pantheon. We're hitting the site, we're passing it that subscription object. We created our own module for this. There's a couple modules that are out there to deal with PWA stuff, but it didn't really have the completeness that we wanted. So we created a module for this, and so what we want to do is we grab these subscriptions, we're going to save them or update them on our CMS. Specifically for the projects that we have in production, we weren't attaching any other fields. We weren't like segmenting users. It was just one screen. That was all we were using. Our demo, again, we're not fielding anything. We have a subscription. It's active or it's inactive. But it is an entity in Drupal, so we can do anything we want that you can do with a normal entity. So the service worker, later on, if you for an actual app, you could create subscriptions and attach like taxonomy to them or something. Someone signs up for stories about planes. They can do that. Hit the CMS and attach that taxonomy to it. So like certain subscriptions, people want stories about planes. Again, for our example, it's very plain and simple. The code that you see right there is just a piece of the module. We're grabbing the subscription object, we're saving it as an entity, and that's pretty much it for that piece of code. Again, the code repos will be available. We'll have links. You can check everything out in your leisure. There's a lot to kind of go over and explain here, so we just want to give you the high-level stuff. And then
I feel like we should just point out too that until this point, all of these code things that we've been showing you has been about creating and managing just the subscription of these notifications. Now we're going to transfer into how you can actually get those notifications and push messages out.
This is really cool, but there's a whole lot of stuff behind all of this. The subscription stuff was a much bigger chunk than we realized. So now we want to send a message. So we can hook on anything that we want in Drupal to send a message. Again, our examples, and we'll show them to you, but we're just going to submit a form, and we do it on a form submit. You could do it on anything else. User comments. You could create something from that, or whatever else. There's so many hooks and everything that we can do in Drupal. We can push subscription stuff anytime we want. So again, this is just kind of some basic code that's actually taking that subscription. So we're getting an array, like a message or something that we want to send. We're building, again, you can see like the VAPID thing there again. We're building out those keys again. We have default options for notifications, and then I'm going to walk over here. We're using a web push thing. I'm just going to do a sign up. We originally did this about 6 months ago. We tried to update it for this talk and failed miserably at it and have a lot of work going on it, so we're still trying to update it. It's supposed to work exactly the same way, except when you create the subscription, there's a couple different keys. For some reason it's not working. We're going to fix it. But the old one still works, and that's what we're going to show you today. So we grab all our subscriptions that are valid, and we build out the subscription object, and we actually push the notification, and we get a response from Google or whoever, and they'll actually tell you if the subscription is still valid or not. So then we can handle all our subscriptions. So if someone, for some reason, I don't know exactly how it works, but they might get rid of the subscription somehow, or it's invalid, or if Google tries to push and it can't push, it might be invalid that way. But Google lets us know that, and then we can handle it in the CMS, so we're not continually pushing that. We can delete it out of our system. You can imagine, we can have hundreds of thousands of subscriptions easily without thinking about it, because it's browser and OS specific. So if they're on their phone, if they're on 2 different browsers on your thing, that's 3 already for one user. So again, we can handle based off of what Google or the vendor is telling us. We can kind of clean out some of the subscriptions. So again, we're creating a subscription object and we're pushing it out, handling those responses. And I think.
Yep. So now we're back in the app because Drupal has taken all that data, said we need to send out this push event. Push event goes through the browser's system and then comes back to app.js, where then we can handle the message event. So that's what we're doing here. As Pete kind of showed in that last slide, you can really kind of configure the data that you want to send. Here we're checking to see if we have a .message. We basically had 2 uses for this, one to push a message, content message, and one to push an actual notification. So here we're just checking to see if a message key exists in that object, and if it does, we're going to do some fancy like display stuff and show it and then hide it after 30 seconds. This too is like what we're doing on Mann and on the NPS ticketing stuff. So we're working just with messages, not with notifications at all. So, and then this is just showing how we would output a notification, basically taking all of the different options and stuff like that that we have available in the CMS, creating the notification object. I don't want to skip back through all the slides, but we showed one earlier of all of those different options that you can do. You can set that up in here. And then just this as service worker registration, service worker register.show notification file at the bottom there, or function, not file. That method, we just pass the title and those options, and that's going to click up the notification to the user. What? I'm sure that a lot of that was probably crazy and didn't really make a lot of sense. Again, we have these repos where you can go and actually take a look at it. I hope that we kind of help to like show the specific parts of what you need to do to be able to handle these 2 APIs. There be dragons in the Drupal and the WordPress plugins. Those 2 are not battle tested by any means. They're meant for demo purposes. But yeah, feel free to take a look if you want to get a more detailed kind of thing.
And feel free to like comment and add question, all that. Like, I would love to talk about it more. And again, like I said, we're trying to update that one module. Just we had huge deliveries this week and didn't get a chance to.
Yeah. And then just to give a real top-level overview, you kind of had this explained to you before, but now we went through the code, so you can kind of like relate everything back to it. But at the start of app.js, we're initializing that service worker. We're checking to see if a subscription exists, and if it doesn't, we're creating one. And then asking the user to allow or block that the notifications from the website. And then after that's all done, we're just chilling and hanging out until we get a message event. And then once we send something from Drupal, that's going to go through the browser vendor push server and then end up hitting up our service worker, which then triggers the methods in app.js, or the events in app.js to fire. Probably not that simple of an overview, but just to relate everything that we did back to those charts earlier. So, demo time.
Now the fun stuff.
Yeah, we're just going to show a video, and then we'll probably potentially jump into.
I'm going to sit over here and explain what's going on.
Yeah.
So on the right side, we have a React app that this team made. Then we adapted a little bit. Left side is Drupal. We're sending a message right now. We're reacting on that message in the app, incoming message. Watch a lot of updates because I didn't update. Now we can send a notification. Again, these are just basic Drupal forms. So now our system notification pops up, which is great. We can send it again based on a tag. We can send like the same notification. We can kind of group them together, and then there's a re-notify button at the bottom, and we can say, re-notify, like this is an updated message, we need to re-notify, or if you already sent it, don't worry about it. So here I click false, send the notification, nothing pops up because I said don't re-notify. Do it again, we'll re-notify. And this is a video, but we can actually do it live here just because of the recording and stuff. We didn't want to deal with all that. So once we get to QA time, we're done with questions, we can actually do it live. Send notification again. Now, because we said re-notify, it pops up again. So that is that one. Another cooler one that's a little more Drupal specific is the next one. There we go. So this is a project working on Bucknell. Ryan, our front-end developer here, had some fun with the admin tabs to get them out of the way for us. So we had this like floaty little admin tab thing going on, and a little button to show and hide, which is really cool. So we were playing this, another little demo I wanted to do. Now we have 2 tabs open for the same site, and I close it on one, I close them all using the PWA and the service orders and the messages. So that's kind of a cool little real-world example that we haven't. That was one where I kept having to close all the windows because the service order wouldn't update. So yeah, that was fun with that. What's next? Oh yeah, so use cases. Again, like I was just showing, that was a fun little thing with the admin tabs. We can kind of close something. You might think of something else in Drupal that you could do with that. Again, we can attach notifications and alerts to anything being published, content being published, any kind of hook that we have in Drupal. Like we can tie into this. The limits are, there's no limits. We can notify admins about things. I don't know if that would be really a good thing to have as an admin if you want pop-ups all the time like that when someone has a web form submission, but it could be a thing. One of the things I was thinking about is like shopping cart icons. You usually have like how many items you have in a shopping cart. Well, I'm almost positive this is how the sites do it. They're using PWAs to message everything, all your tabs update. If you add something in shopping cart in one tab, it updates across all your tabs. Stuff like that. There's a lot of other use cases. And again, it's a little nebulous as far as like, there's PWA is a huge world of things going on. Push and the messaging is a subset of it. I often like not confuse it, but like kind of things go across boundaries in my head a lot while I'm thinking about it. But some pretty cool stuff.
There's also like, in terms of like with other PWA stuff, if you really want to get into it, you can do like caching, so offline data storing stuff for reloading like a home page or something like that. You can actually just store that in the user's cache. The world of PWAs is like fairly large.
Yeah, and if
It gets kind of complicated.
yeah, Google has great examples for PWA stuff. I was banging my head against the wall trying to do the offline, just like a simple offline page. So if your network goes down, you can have a branded page for your website that says your network's down. I was trying to do this in Drupal. I don't know how long I spent on it, a couple hours trying to figure this out. It just wasn't working. Finally Googled it, and Google had a good example of it. I copy pasted and it worked fine, and I was like, so Google has great examples for PWAs. It's, yeah, just so you know.
Just to go over the little eye-rolly bits of this, because we talked about how cool this is. Very limited browser support. You got Chrome, you got Firefox. Safari has been coming soon for a while. I think we gave this talk a year ago, and it's still coming soon. And there's no Chrome iOS support. So basically, you don't have push notification stuff on iOS at all. So you're kind of working with a limited subset of users. The spec is also considered experimental. It's not like written in stone. At this point, hopefully they're not going to be changing anything, but experimental means that like they could say, you can't send push notifications like under the cover of darkness, and you have to always make sure to display notifications. So something could change in the future, hopefully not. This is also something that in our context, it works great for kiosks because we can basically set up the computer, say, subscribe to notifications. If you're doing this on a website, if you're doing this for your blog or something like that, you can't always guarantee that somebody will subscribe to it, so you shouldn't be doing anything that depends on these messages just being sent or something like that. Yeah, and like I just said earlier, they might not allow the push to happen without showing a notification. And yeah, there's a couple of really great resources. In particular, that first link is a really good reference for it. So yeah, I think that's it.
Questions, yeah. Yes. Oh, that one.
So would it be possible to have a push go out that basically says this page review, this node, for instance, has been completely updated, and then the browser can take that information and completely rewrite the page? Is that possible?
Yes.
And would that require that they click I accept each time, or is that just one time push notifications allowed?
Yeah, so that's just a one-time push. You can go into your browser settings to change all that stuff. Chrome for a while now has a little, I think it's just an eye in a circle that you can push, and it shows you a couple different options that you can change. Allow flash and all that kind of stuff is in that little drop down. I think it's in there now. So it is kind of a one-time thing. The possibility for that is updating content on the fly like that is possible. There's just going off the different caching strategies of how you can do a lot of offline caching. Just one of the examples is you'll pull up your cache page first, and then it'll go out to the network, try to get the new thing, and then update the page. That is a typical caching strategy, so that would be very similar in that sense. Yes?
Is this assuming nothing is actively uncompleted in Drupal, or do you have to worry about certain settings and configuration of that?
You do have to worry about a few things. There are, I'm trying to think right now. So we're using a web push package. That was the one that I was trying to update. That one, it was 5 different versions that it updated in the past year, and that's when I fully updated it. It just wasn't working. So I'm not sure if it was on there on our end. It is a requirement for that web push class. I'm trying to think what else. Because we weren't, the other stuff was for, no, okay, so we were on Pantheon. Pantheon has all the necessary PHP packages. Lando and stuff like that, we had to add a few PHP packages.
GMP in particular is required for those the VAPID keys to get changed around, so.
So there's that. Again, the push manager module creates that object, the entity and everything like that. So that's what we custom did ourselves. But as far as Drupal itself, there's no real other environment configuration or anything like that. You just need to be able to handle the subscription options. Yes.
So you mentioned that there was basically a list of the subscriptions on the Drupal side. Mm-hmm. Is that a content type that gets generated for this module? Or?
We created our own entity, so it's not just a content type, it's our whole own entity for it. So we can field it. It looks really ugly right now because it uses the endpoint as the title, and the endpoints are extremely long. And again, part of this is all the way in the back end, so it's not public facing, so we never updated it to use something else. But it creates its own entity. We can do anything that you can do with a normal entity. I don't think we have it. It's not bundleable, but it is fieldable. I don't know if it's revisionable at the moment. I don't think we did revisions on it. I don't think we did revisions. But it is an entity. You can field it. You can do all that kind of stuff. And that, again, add taxonomy so you can segment your audience, all that kind of stuff. The future is possible with that stuff. Anybody else? Yes?
The push notification, will the user have to be online or should visit the site to get the notification, or will it come up even after?
It'll come up even after, yeah. So if they close out all the tabs on the windows, your service worker is still running, so it's still acting on that. The thing that we do with the messages, we're going to clients and saying, or we're going to the tabs and saying, hey, here's a little message, and that was the little green thing that came up in the web page. But to show the actual OS notification, that's all done from the service worker, right? I'm saying that correctly, right? Yeah. That's all done from your service worker. So you can close out your tabs. If Chrome is completely off, then it's not going to show up because Chrome's not running. But if I'm off the website, your notification will still pop up.
My service worker usually using post message so that only the tabs that are looking for React.
It can do, yeah, you could do it that way. So you're creating your service worker, you're telling it how to do stuff. So that kind of routing you could do. easily. Well, thanks for coming. If any more questions or comments or whatever, feel free to come up. But yeah, enjoy Drupaldelphia.